So how does a giant public company just make up billions of dollars in revenue, like out of thin air? It sounds crazy, right? Well, that's exactly what we're digging into today, one of the wildest financial scandals from the dot-com bubble, the story of Qwest Communications. All right, let's just break this down for a second. This one quote, it basically tells you the whole story. You've got the big names, right? Qwest and, yeah, that Enron. You've got the crime, and you've got the fallout. And we're not talking about some tiny rounding error here. Nope. This was a massive, calculated deception that absolutely crippled a telecom giant. Just look at that. Let it sink in. $2 billion. That's the amount of revenue Qwest eventually had to turn around and say, yeah, that wasn't real. I mean, that's the sheer scale of what we're dealing with here. A number that big completely changes how you see a company's success. So yeah, that's the million-dollar question. Or I guess the $2 billion question, right? How in the world do you fake that much money and keep it hidden, even for a short time? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack. Let's get into it. Okay, so before we get into the how, we got to talk about the why. And for that, we need to rewind. Picture it, the late 1990s, the dot-com boom. It was a time of just insane optimism and maybe even more insane speculation. So Qwest jumps onto the scene in '97, and they go all in on the internet gold rush. Their logic was pretty solid, actually. The internet's going to be huge, and it needs pipes. So let's build the pipes. And they didn't just dip a toe in. They made a $30 billion bet on building this massive fiber optic network. But then the bubble popped. And all of a sudden, they had all this infrastructure with way less demand. And Wall Street? Oh, the pressure to show growth was just crushing. And for the execs at the top, the reality was brutal. The market didn't care about long-term vision anymore. It was all about now, now, now. Show us explosive growth this quarter or you're toast. It was a simple, terrifying mission. Grow or die. A total pressure cooker. So what happens when you can't actually earn the kind of growth the market is screaming for? What's your next move? Well, for the folks at Qwest, the answer was, let's just make it up. And this, right here, is where the whole thing gets wild. The magic trick behind this whole scheme really comes down to this one phrase, non-arm's length deals. It sounds super technical, right? But the concept is actually pretty simple. It's any deal that isn't done on the open market between two unrelated people. Think about it like this. If you sell your car to your cousin for $1 just to have a sale on paper, that's not a real market transaction. And for accountants, that kind of thing is a major red flag. So here's how they pulled off the illusion. It's kind of brilliant in a twisted way. Qwest would go to another company, say Enron, and sell them access to their fiber network. But then, at the exact same time, Enron would sell a similar thing right back to Qwest. So if you just look at the paperwork, it looks like two legitimate sales. Revenue for Qwest, revenue for Enron. Everyone's happy. But in reality, it's just a loop. No real money, no real value ever changed hands. And this really shows you the difference, right? A real sale is simple. I have a product, you give me cash for it, new money comes into my company. But with the Qwest swap, it's like we just traded baseball cards that were worth the same amount. Nothing new entered the system. The assets just canceled each other out, but they booked it as if they'd made a huge cash sale. It was pure accounting, smoke and mirrors. And get this, the fiber swaps weren't the only trick up their sleeve. Not by a long shot. They were also big on something called channel stuffing. Basically, right before the quarter ended, they just shipped tons of equipment to their customers, whether the customer actually asked for it or not. Why? So they could book it as a sale for that quarter and pump up the numbers. It's just another way to pull revenue from the future into the present to make things look better than they are. So you take those fiber swaps, you add in all this channel stuffing, and the numbers just get mind-boggling. All in all, from 1999 to 2001, these schemes jacked up their earnings by $1.5 billion. Just incredible. But here's the thing about a lie that big. You can't keep it going forever. Eventually, the whole thing gets too complicated, too fragile, and the whole house of cards is destined to come tumbling down. And what was the first domino to fall? Well, it was the spectacular implosion of their partner in crime, Enron. When Enron went down in 2002, investigators started tearing through their books, and they kept finding these really weird circular deals with this one telecom company, Qwest. And just like that, someone pulled the thread, and the whole thing started to unravel. And once that happened, boy, things moved fast. You can see it here. 2002, the SEC is all over them. 2003, charges are officially filed against the execs. By 2007, the CEO, Joe Nacchio, is convicted. Now, it wasn't for the accounting fraud directly, but for insider trading connected to it. The company kind of staggered on for a few more years, but by 2011, it was acquired by CenturyLink, and that was the end of Qwest. So why insider trading? Well, think about it. While the company was publicly propping up its stock price with all this fake revenue, the CEO, Joe Nacchio, knew the real story. And what was he doing? He was quietly selling off his own shares to the tune of $45 million. He cashed out before the public knew the truth, and the stock, inevitably, cratered. And for that, for the illegal stock sales and his role in the whole mess, Nacchio got 2 years in federal prison. I mean, what a fall from grace for a guy who was once a titan of the industry. But, the executives aren't the only ones who paid the price. The real cost, that was paid by the employees. In the aftermath, as the company was just trying to stay afloat, 11,000 people lost their jobs. It's just a gut-wrenching reminder that there are real human consequences to this kind of corporate greed.
So, when all the dust finally settled, what was left? What did we actually learn from this spectacular failure? What's the lasting impact?
Well, if there's a silver lining, it's that regulators didn't just sit on their hands. The FCC and the SEC cracked down, and they cracked down hard. They brought in much stricter rules for reporting. Companies had to be way more transparent about these kinds of capacity swaps. The whole point was to make it much, much harder to pull off this kind of accounting magic trick in the future. And that really brings us to the big question for today, doesn't it? The names change, the specific schemes get more sophisticated, but that intense pressure to show growth, no matter what, that has not gone away. And it really makes you wonder, are the same kinds of creative accounting games from the dot-com era still happening right now, just buried deep inside the complexities of modern mergers and acquisitions? It's definitely something worth thinking about.